course, one of them is life imprisonment. And the courts have told you before. I know we talked about that in jury selection, then we didn't talk about it in the guilt phase, and now we're talking about it again. But the minimum is 51 years. Okay? He's 56 years old. He turns 57 next month. So do the math. He's never getting out again. The other thing I want to say is that we accept your verdict. I'd be lying if I said that we didn't disagree with some things, but that's just me doing my job for my clients. But you all have worked very hard in this case. You deliberated. It's a secret proceeding. I don't know what went on back there, but I just wanted to say that we appreciate the conscientious decisions and the hard work that y'all have put into this, and we accept the verdict that you all have rendered. Now, this is the sentencing phase. It's a different task that you have. It's a different trial. Trial within a trial, mini trial, you hear less expressions. But normally, the judge sets a sentence in a case, but this is a very special circumstance. So I want to give you some general principles, if you will, to maybe guide you through this process. Protect society. We've talked about that already. I'm not going to beat it to death. Sean Finnegan is never going to get out of custody again. Punishment for the defendant. That's what we're here to figure out. To serve justice and to follow the law. Now, where does the law come from in this case? I think we all know laws are passed by our General Assembly, the legislative branch, our state government, and our elected officials have decided that in this very unique circumstance, in a criminal case like this, that you, the jury, should have three options. We've talked about those. Life imprisonment, life without the possibility of parole, or a sentence of death. Three options. I'm here to tell you that the law is satisfied with a life sentence. The law is satisfied with a life sentence. In fact, a life sentence in this case follows the law, it promotes public safety, and it provides punishment to Sean Finnegan. He's never going to get out of jail again. The sentence of whether to impose death is a choice among alternatives. But I want to remind you that it's not some foregone conclusion. The state, a moment ago, got up and talked about putting things on a scale and weighing things. And the court will instruct you. Yes, you are supposed to weigh things. But this is not some rigid, rote, mechanical process. This is not some metaphorical scale where we get out and we put 6 chips on one side and 4 on the other and, presto changeo, sentence of death. Boom, easy, done. Pull a lever. That is not what this is about. And I know you all have been here a long time. I know you've been away from your families, friends, and your life, and your job, all those things. But I cannot impress upon you the importance of not falling into some mechanical view in this process. The state talked about oaths. And I can't remember how many oaths you all have taken throughout this process over the past couple of months, but there's been a lot. But if you remember back to when we were doing individual jury selection, you all took an oath and you took time to fill out those questionnaires, which were very helpful to us, to talk about very personal parts of your life and personal opinions about serious topics like capital punishment, the criminal justice system. And you took an oath that you could meaningfully consider all three options. Not just whether you could meaningfully consider a sentence of death, but that you could meaningfully consider all three options. And each of you said you could. And each of you are here for a reason. This is not random happenstance. We went through a very lengthy process to select both from the state and from us, to select you all to serve on this jury. And you're here for a reason, is my point. The law does not recognize automatic death penalty. That's not what this process is about. So I just want to remind you, the law is satisfied with a sentence of life. Next, I want to recognize the loss that Ms. Paxton's family has suffered. The state brought up an opening, and I think it is a good reminder that a great deal of this trial was focused on the power dynamics between Rebecca Dishman and Sean Finnegan. But I'm here to say that it's a tragedy what happened to her. It's awful. We're not here to blame her for anything that she did or didn't do. None of this is her fault. And so I just want to make that clear. Her family through this process, everybody's been very respectful, and I wanted to show them respect as well. But my job, hopefully, is to humanize my client, and I know that seems difficult based on some of the evidence that everybody's reviewed in this case, the lifestyle, the behavior. But I'm here to hopefully emphasize some positive qualities that he possesses. There will be some negative things as well. Our proof will consist of Jennifer Miller from the Pine House again. I wanted her to come back and just talk briefly about his job duties while he worked there, because Sean has worked for, he's 56, he's worked for 40 years of his life consistently. So I just wanted to bring her back to talk a little bit about some of his work responsibilities and what he did there. But the bulk of our proof, our evidence, is going to be in the form of testimony from a family member of his, Miss Roxanne Mundy, who is, there were 6 children in the Finnegan, that generation of children, Sean's brothers and sisters, so he's one of 6. Many of them have passed away. But Miss Mundy is his oldest brother's ex-wife. Sean was raised in Deerfield Beach, Florida, outside, just north of Fort Lauderdale, on the Atlantic side, in between Pompano Beach and Boca Raton. That's where he's from. He moved around some early as a kid, but that's where they settled. And so Roxanne is going to be able to give us not only her knowledge of the family dynamic of the Finnegan family, which is pretty dark, but she also has eyewitness. She lived in the house for about a year when she was pregnant with her first child. So she's going to give you some insights into what things were like there in the Finnegan home. But if I could sum it up, I would say that Sean Finnegan's formative years, his childhood, adolescence, teenage years, there was a lot of damage. There was injury, there was abuse, and none of which he had any control over. And we're offering this not as an excuse. Okay, I want to make that clear as well. I'm not saying that he's justified in doing what he did in this case, or that somehow it's excusable. I think that's an easy cliche, and I think it's kind of cheap. And so I just want to reinforce that we are here simply to explain who he is, because it's important. If you are going to vote whether to sentence someone to death, I think it's important to know a little bit about who they are. I think you want to know something about him, because he sat over here quietly this whole time. He didn't testify in the guilt or innocence phase, which is his right, and there are reasons for that. I don't know if he's going to testify in the sentencing hearing or not, but regardless, I think it's important that we present some information on who he is. And it's also important to show and perhaps differentiate between what many of your all's childhoods were like. We didn't get into that granular level of detail in your jury questionnaires, so I don't know what everyone's walk in life has been, but I think that most of us were raised in a home with love and protection and dignity and guidance and respect, and he didn't really have that in the Finnegan house. So I think we all can agree that children start out basically the same, like a blank slate, and through twists of fate and other decisions and actions that are out of our control, our lives can end up remarkably different. And especially as it relates to a history of sexual abuse and the trauma that he suffered, I think it's important to show that he didn't have any help. He didn't have anybody there for him to support him. His mother, Frances, with 6 kids, and the behavior of his dad, John Sr., Big John. I think poor Francis was just trying to make it day by day. And I think Sean and some of his other brothers slipped through the cracks. And I try to think of it psychologically or even emotionally. And I've got a toddler at home. We put up baby toys a couple of months ago in one of those hammer sets where you push down and one pops up on the other side of the board. And I think that's a good analogy for the psychology or the emotion of what dealing with trauma is like. That I think Sean, things happened to him, which we're going to talk about. It's not pleasant, but I think that he buried it deep down and tried to lock it away. And it came back out in other ways, in not healthy ways, with violence and risky behavior and toxic relationships and poor decision making and substance use. So I think that's important to remember. As the state mentioned, yes, there are going to be the legal principles of this process are presentation of aggravating circumstances and presentation of mitigating circumstances. And so our mitigation is going to be basically a variety of instances from his childhood, the things that he experienced, what his family unit was like, sort of the foundation of his life, and why perhaps why we're all sitting here talking to each other. Maybe some explanation for that. But ultimately, I want you to remember that aggravating circumstances are a reason to impose death. Mitigation is a reason to vote for life. And at the end of this small trial, I'll get back up and I'll be advocating for a sentence of life. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. State ready to call its first witness.
Your Honor, victim impact statements will be read at this time. And
Okay.
I don't know if the court wants to address those in a particular order, or if you want.
Let's see. The first one I've got is
Should have 4 total.
Beverly Jeffers. Ms. Jeffers, if you'll step up here, please, ma'am. Would you have a seat up here at the witness stand for me, please? You'll raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. There's your victim impact statement.
Thank you.
If you'll read that to the jury, please.
I'm sorry. Your Honor, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of our family. Our lives have forever been changed. It is always hurtful to lose someone you love, but it's a different kind of hurt and pain to lose someone you love the way our family lost Jennifer. We didn't just lose Jennifer, she was taken from us. When Jennifer went missing, we looked all over town for her. Gail, Mill, and David and Brittany looked on the south side of Knoxville. The rest of us looked on the north side. We looked for her not just for a day or two. We looked for her for months, day after day. Her grandmother, who she called Mom, would call me almost every day to ask if I had seen Jennifer. It was so hard on us. We knew Jennifer wouldn't go for days and not contact Meal or one of us. Then on August the 6th, 2020, Patty, Jennifer's mother, received a call no mother should ever have to get. They found Jennifer. Patty was so devastated. When she called me, I couldn't understand what she was saying. Then when I finally did understand, I, like the rest of our family, went into complete shock. The most awful thing that could happen to a person and their family did happen. Jennifer was murdered. Jennifer, who was a mother, a daughter, a granddaughter, a sister, a niece, and a cousin. Her mother, Patty, didn't make it through the loss and devastation. She died with a broken heart before Patty passed away. She asked myself and the other ladies here with me today to promise her we would be here every day in court for her and Jennifer to show Jennifer was loved, is loved, and forever will be loved and missed. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. If I could have that back, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Then next I have, okay. Do you have any questions? Any questions from the fence? Okay, thank you. Then next I have, is it Brittany Payne? And I think Miss Payne.
Brittany Payne, BRITTANY
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead.
Jennifer,
Is this yours or your grandmother's?
mine.
Okay.
Jennifer was my first cousin, but we grew up as sisters. I love Jennifer with all my heart, and losing her has really hurt me. I can't think straight, I have nightmares, I can't sleep right, and this past week I can't even eat right. I can't even listen to songs without thinking of her. It hurts me to know that I'll never see her again. I'll never hear her voice again, or see her smile, or hear her laugh. It absolutely kills me that I didn't get to tell her goodbye. Knowing I'll never get those phone calls or messages ever again destroyed my heart. My whole world changed, turned upside down. I'll never look at this world the same again.
Thank you. And I think this is your grandmother's, correct?
Correct.
And I think she's here today.
She is.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Jennifer was my granddaughter. I loved her dearly. Losing her destroyed my heart. She was my everything. When Jennifer went missing, we searched everywhere for her. Not for days or weeks. We searched for 8 months. When Jennifer was found, sadly it wasn't the news we were hoping for. When I learned of Jennifer's death, a part of me died as well. I struggle every day. The anger, the hurt, the despair is indescribable. The nightmares that I still live with to this day will not go away in this life. The only thing that helps me get by from day to day is knowing I'll be with her again one day in heaven. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Any questions from the state? Any questions from the defense? Okay, thank you, ma'am. You can step down. And then next I have, is it Michelle? And Michelle, I think you're the first cousin, right? Okay, step on up here, please, ma'am. And I added that last page like you asked me to.
Okay.
And then be sure you don't read anything that I've drawn a line through. Okay? If you'll raise your right hand, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you for having a seat, please. If you'll tell me your first name and last name and spell them both.
Michelle McMahon, MICHELLE, MCMAHAN.
Thank you so much. Now you can read your statement.
I'm Michelle, a first cousin to Jennifer's mother, Patricia. First, I'd like to tell you about Jennifer. She was kind and loving, and she cared about other people, even strangers. She grew up with a tough life, as many of us did. The difference between her and us is that she never seemed to make peace and get past the hardships of her childhood and upbringing. She never knew her natural father, and partially, I think that gave her a distorted view of what a typical family unit should be. I believe this led to her making a series of poor decisions in her own life, including the men she chose to try to build a family with. She longed to have a typical, normal American family, but she trusted too easily and too much. Jennifer's mother tried the best she knew how in raising Jennifer, but in her own words, she made a ton of mistakes, especially with Jennifer. Patty was desperate for Jennifer not to make the same mistakes that she did herself, like becoming a mother at just 15 years old. Because of this, she was way too hard on Jennifer, not allowing her to have normal friends. She wasn't allowed to play in the neighborhood like her brothers or hang out with others after school unless it was with family. This is why Jennifer so lovingly clung to her grandmother. She felt loved with her. She was allowed to be more of a child with a normal life when she was with her. So naturally, Jennifer had more of a mother-daughter relationship with her than she did her own mom. Jennifer was also the middle child and the only girl to her mother, Patricia. When Jennifer went missing, it didn't go unnoticed by our family. Even though she had become part of the homeless community, many of us searched for her for months as we looked at every person we passed as we went about our daily lives, hoping to spot her somewhere, as we always had in the past. Patty, like many other parents of addicts, was terrified of getting that call or knock on her door to tell her that Jennifer had overdosed and was gone. I spent much of the time after Jennifer went missing with her mother until her passing only 16 months later. She suffered finding out about Jennifer's demise after 9 months of searching. She blamed herself. She stated and questioned regularly how if she had been a better mom or if she had tried one more time to help her, if she could have prevented what happened to Jennifer. She thought Jennifer fell victim because maybe she didn't feel loved enough, or because she had been so hard on her in her life. Patty died in the hospital, still crying and suffering over what happened. Patty had battled health issues for many years, but after losing a second child, she had just given up. She was tired of the regret, tired of the nightmares and the day thoughts, tired of suffering and missing her daughter, Jennifer. Our family would just like to say that Jennifer was not a prostitute in the terms that one may think. She was a desperate young, addicted woman who was offered drugs and a place to live in exchange for sex.
Please. Any questions from the state? Any questions from the defense? Thank you, ma'am. You can step down and freestyle in the court. We're free to go. And ma'am, clerk will mark that as sentencing ID number 1. And it's just for ID. It's not made an exhibit.
Yes,
Let me get it together here for you. And any additional proof by the state?
No, Your Honor, state rest.
Thank you. And for the defense, who will be your first witness?
Please, we call Jennifer Miller.
Ms. Miller. So we need to get Miss Miller.
She's outside the hallway, Judge. I can go
Okay.
ahead and get her ready to.
I think the deputy will get her for me.
I'll get her. My co-counsel.
Okay. Yes, sir. You go to the restroom? Okay. We'll take about a 5-minute break. Let's go step down and go to the restroom. Our 2 officers, y'all need to go? Okay, so y'all stay with me. Okay? All right. Take a rise, please. Thank you. Y'all can have a seat, please. And I'm just going to sit here and we're just going to wait until they come back.
I'm just going to go too.
Sure.
ramp up at a particular time of night or morning or late night? Was there a rush? It's a better way to ask it.
Sometimes, maybe like 8 to midnight.
Okay. And how many tables were in the Pint House?
I don't know. Several. We didn't do table service. People
Gotcha.
just would come to the bar to order.
I got you. So they would order food at the bar,
Yes.
and it would be brought out to the bar.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so one cook is doing all the cooking. How was the kitchen, large or small, or how would you describe?
It's small.
Small kitchen? Okay. Do you know, this is kind of out there, but do you know what his pay would have been at that time?
I don't know.
Do you think he was paid hourly or salary?
Hourly.
Okay. Okay, and so you testified a minute ago, and I think already previously at trial, that Mr. Finnegan worked 5 to 7 days a week. Is that
Right.
what your testimony was?
Yes.
And you had an opinion that he was reliable, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe what that means in the context? You know, why is it important to have a reliable cook in a restaurant? Can you describe that a little bit?
There's a lot of turnover. People, they come, they stay for a while, they quit, or they don't show up to their shifts, or they're late frequently, or anything like that.
Was Mr. Finnegan, did he have a lot of no-call, no-shows, or?
Rarely. Very rare, yeah.
Okay. Does the cook also wash the dishes?
There's a dish machine that they just get run through, yeah.
Hobart machine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember. Okay. And as far as Mr. Finnegan's attitude and demeanor with the staff, how would you categorize that, or characterize that, excuse me?
Generally pretty normal. We joked around a lot. It's a pretty laid-back job.
Okay. Pass the witness, Judge.
Questions?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. You step down, you appreciate it. There you go.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Roxanne Mundy, Your Honor.
Deputy, would you get her for me, please? Ma'am, if you'll step up here next to me, please. All the way up here, please. Right up here, please, ma'am. Good morning. If you'll raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. If you have a seat, please. If you'll tell me both your first name, you have a seat. If you'll tell me both your first name and last name and spell them both for me. And if you'll speak up in the microphone, that'll help everybody hear. Okay? All right, your first name and last name and spell them both.
My name is Roxanne Mundy, RoxanneMundy.
Thank you. Questions?
Ms. Mundy, welcome. Where do you live currently? You don't have to give your street address, but generally, where do you live?
In Indiana,
Okay. And how old are you, ma'am?
61.
Are you, who do you live with?
My husband,
Okay. Do you have children?
we do,
Okay. How many biological children do you have?
2,
Okay. And are there stepchildren as well?
yes,
Okay. How many stepchildren?
We have 4 other daughters, 4.
Okay. Do you work outside the home currently?
No,
Okay. Historically, did you work in a particular field?
yes, always.
And what was that?
Mainly restaurant work and construction.
Do you know Sean Finnegan?
I do.
You recognize him sitting over here?
Yes.
When's the last time you saw him?
Well, it's been probably about little over 3 decades, personal.
Okay. At some point in your life, did you meet his older brother,
Yes.
John Finnegan Jr.?
Yes.
Describe how that occurred, please.
We were dating. We met each other, and then we were married.
Okay. Where did you all meet? Where were you living?
We met in a restaurant. We lived in separate places while we were dating, and then later past that, then we moved in together
Okay.
when we were engaged.
What state were you living in?
Florida,
Okay. Which part of Florida?
Fort Lauderdale.
Okay. Is that where you were raised?
Yes, that's where I was raised.
That's where you grew up?
Yes.
How old were you when you first met John Finnegan Jr.?
Early 20s, 21-ish, 22.
Okay. And when you first met him, were you dating immediately, or was it just an acquaintance at
Well,
that
we,
point?
of course, talked and spoke on the phone. Back then, we didn't have the technology we do now, so it would be a phone call or something like that, and then a lunch or a dinner or a walk on the beach
Okay.
kind of thing, and then as we get to know each other. We did that often until we really knew each other.
You were dating.
Yes.
When you were first dating John Jr., did you meet any of the other family members at that point? Did he introduce you to them?
Not right away. It was probably about 6 months or so that he introduced me to the family.
Okay. And describe for the jury your first impressions of the Finnegan family.
Well, the father was quite fearful. I did have very uneasy feelings. The children seemed to be even afraid of their father, like very meek, quiet. The mother, Frances, was very kind and soft-spoken, but also had the same appearance of perhaps fear of the husband. It seemed like he controlled what people did or said within the home, and if they were allowed to, like, really, say anything, or, maybe if they got out of line, because he was very aggressive.
When you first met John Finnegan Jr., what was that interaction like? Excuse me, when you first met John Sr., Big John, what was that interaction like?
I was terrified of the man. He said horrific thing, like your first greeting with him as a female, he was not kind.
Inappropriate?
Inappropriate, very inappropriate.
Okay. So what about Mr. Sean Finnegan? Do you have any, like, when you first started dating his older brother, did you have any initial interactions with him or takeaways or memories?
Just that he might have been a little afraid and a little shy to come out and really be out there, as, most families. I took it as just a new meeting, with the children, and children can be giddy because his other little brother and sister were also in the home, and they were your typical kids, but still, like what I would say, like, is if you were to stifle a child and not allow them to interact with guests, perhaps, go to your room, don't come out, kind of thing from his father.
Well, let's try to identify the children in order. So, you were early 20s. You first started dating John Finnegan Jr. How old would he have been at that time, the oldest brother?
If I was 22, yeah, he was 24.
Okay. And the next youngest brother below him is who?
Would have been Edward,
Okay. And he went by Eddie.
Eddie.
Okay. How old was Eddie at that time? Approximately, if you know.
He would have been 20, well, I think he was just a year under John.
Okay. And then after Eddie, who was next?
And then Jimmy. Or
Jimmy.
no, I'm sorry, Sean.
Okay. How old was Sean at that time?
In his early to mid-teens.
Okay. And then next was Jimmy.
Yes.
And how old was Jimmy?
Young teens, mid-teens.
Okay. And then after Jimmy, who was next?
Colleen,
Okay. How old was Colleen?
maybe 10-ish, 11 maybe.
Okay. And then the youngest was who?
Danny,
Danny. And how old was Danny?
7 or 8.
Okay. All right. So at some point, did your relationship develop with John Finnegan Jr.?
Yes,
Did it progress, I guess is a better way.
it did.
Okay. And without going through the entire relationship history between you two, but can you just describe for the jury how that progressed and that led you to end up moving in with the Finnegan family? Describe that for him, please.
Okay, John and I, dated until the time we thought that we would really like to spend our lives together and be engaged and get married and create our own future. He was very much different than the rest of the family because he pretty much had moved out earlier, so he didn't have what was going on in the home in his life, and he really didn't want to go there much. And then we decided to move in together. I lived in a townhome. He lived with a friend. And then we decided we were gonna start looking for an apartment. We did that. We moved in together. We had a roommate. And then I found out I was pregnant. His mom had come over. We tried to have his mom with us as much as possible. And so one day I was not feeling well, and it kind of progressed a little bit for a little time where I thought maybe I better see my doctor and have a test, and found out I was pregnant. So then we had to, make a bigger decision, being engaged and then getting married and all that. So we did. Through my 4th month sonogram, there were a little complications with the pregnancy. So the doctor said that somebody would have to be with me all the time and be slower or bed rest. I was always a very active person. Bed rest wasn't going to work for me. So we decided to speak to Sean's parents, and because of the house being so large and everything, there was a nice big back bedroom that we were going to move me into. So here we had to go again, get folks, and we moved in with his parents and the kids until after my pregnancy. And then after we had baby, maybe 2 or 3 months later, we were able to actually go back and get into our own place again.
Okay. Before we launch into the family in the home, as you became integrated in their family, did you learn about how the Finnegans had come to live in Florida?
Yes. Later, some things are hard to talk about for others, but later on and after comfortable conversations were easy to come by, John had let me know that when they moved here, they had to move in a hurry from where they were living in Ohio, had to leave everything behind. They ended up in a car in a rest area, and that was in Florida, in Pompano or Deerfield. And they're very close together, so it's kind of almost one big city. But they lived in a car. Their father went to work. My husband went to work with him. And the other children, the boys, were supposed to go to family uncles, and I don't know that they were really biological family uncles because I never met that side of the family. But that's what I was told. So, and then Colleen and Danny stayed in the car with Frances, their mother, in the rest area. And that's pretty much the basis of how they started out.
Do you know how long they lived that way?
I understand it to be quite some time. It could have been anywhere from 6 to 9 months.
And that was while they were trying to get money together to get a stable
Right,
residence?
to save money to get into a place.
All right, so when John Jr. went to work with his dad, was he still of school age? Was he still a juvenile?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think he was 16 when it happened.
And so did he go back to school at that point?
No,
So he dropped out?
yes.
And what kind of work did the father do, Big John?
He was a butcher.
Okay. And so what kind of work was John Jr. doing with his dad?
It was a supermarket that they worked in, so he did like shelf work, stocking, sometimes wrapping meat. But basically, the groceries, just putting everything out.
Okay. All right. The family eventually found a stable residence in Deerfield, is that right?
They did.
Okay. Describe what the house looked like, or what kind of place was it?
House
Describe
was
it.
beautiful, large, very open. I mean, just your Florida. I don't know if anybody here knows much about Florida, but the homes are built very large, very tall ceilings, very strong, beautiful architecture, and the rooms, of course, like when you walked into their home, it was a living room, kitchen, dining room, kind of huge open area.
So who actually bought that house?
Eddie did, their
The
son
son.
Eddie, the second to John's, under John.
So how old was Eddie?
He was in his teens,
So a teenager bought a giant
elder
house?
teen, yeah.
And how do you think he came into the money to be able to do that?
He was working for some Italian people that probably weren't the nicest type of Italian people.
I understand. So you moved into that house eventually, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so when you moved in, who all was living there?
Oh, Sean, Danny, Colleen, Francis, their grandfather, their father's father, who was a war veteran, John Sr., the father, myself, and my husband.
Okay, and so Eddie and Jimmy were already out of the house?
Yes, Jimmy was on his own at an early stage. I mean, Eddie was on his own.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sounds
Jimmy, I wasn't quite sure.
Gotcha. So, how old was Sean when you moved in to live with them?
I would say 13, 14,
Okay.
school age, middle school age.
What was his demeanor like?
Giddy, funny, typical teenage boy. But kind of stayed to himself in his room all the time. And that his room was, it was dark. It was, like headbanger music, heavy metal, if you will. Darker walls, just kind of to himself all the time.
Was he going to school at that time?
No.
Do you know why?
Well, he was supposed to. And there were times that him and his brother walked to school, but there was a truancy officer that came to the house one day and wanted to know why they weren't in school because they had missed so many days. And it ended up that it wasn't because he was skipping school. He was going to uncle's home who was picking him up with his brother.
Okay.
And
Well, okay. Before I get to that, if I could have just a second, Judge. Now, first witness, Judge. Ms. Mundy, have I provided you some of, well, first of all, can you identify this packet of documents I'm handing to you?
yeah, these are Sean's school records.
Okay. And have I provided that to you for you to look over?
Yes.
In preparation for your testimony here today?
Yes.
I'm not asking you to quote from them, but based on your general knowledge of his lack of attendance at school, those documents appear to reveal that he stopped going to school in about the 8th grade. Is that
Yes.
accurate to your knowledge?
Yes.
Judge, I move that 10 of these is next exhibit.
That'll be sentencing exhibit number 1.
Okay, so Sean wasn't going to school when you moved in. Were any of the other children not going to school? Any other siblings?
As far as I know, Jimmy was not showing up.
Okay. Now, before we get to that, I just want to ask you about the general dynamic in this family unit when you moved in, okay? And I want to go down the list. When you moved in, sounds like you had your own room off to the back side of the house, is that right?
Yeah, pretty much the whole back of the home.
Okay. A place where you could shut the door and kind of have some refuge, is that fair?
Yeah, it was a large lanai, and we turned it into the room, the bedroom and the baby's room.
What was John Finnegan Sr., Big John, describe his behavior, demeanor, affect, describe what he was like to be around to this jury?
Awful. Everybody in the house feared him. Didn't know what he was going to be like when he came home. He was a major, major alcoholic. And then later found out that he was also gambling. He was always very aggressive. If he walked in the door and Francis did not have his food prepared, when he wanted, if he walked in the door, he wanted it on the table.
And if it wasn't on the table, what happened?
Yeah, if it wasn't on the table, and trust me, he pretty much always had a beer or something in his hand, he'd throw it.
At whom?
Her,
At Francis?
yeah.
Would he throw things at the children?
He was, yeah, well, yes, he would, if they heard him, they would run to the room. they wouldn't come out. They were terrified of him. And he was always really aggressive, throwing things around, breaking things, picking up dining room chairs and throwing it. Whoever was there, the children could be standing there, and he would just act like that. So it was terrifying, honestly.
Was he, as it relates to Frances Finnegan, you're saying he was verbally abusive to her?
He was always very degrading to her.
Was he physically abusive to her?
Yes, very.
How so?
Well, the times that I could see is when he would throw things at her visibly, and then there were times he would drag her to the bedroom, and you could just hear the beating and the, crying and the begging and pleading of please stop. You're hurting me, stop it. The kids are going to hear this. It was not an easy feat to listen to.
And as to his dynamic with his children that were in the home, at least, what was that like?
The same.
Abusive?
Very.
Verbally?
Both verbally and physically.
Okay. Did he spare Danny and Colleen, the youngest, or were they all subject to this?
Danny and Colleen kind of got they did hear all of the violence, and they did hear the vulgar remarks, and there were times that, a bottle or a dish or a glass vase or something would miss their head, and they'd go run to the room. But he never, really snatched them up like he did the boys.
And I apologize, I forgot to ask you later, but we don't have to go through all of it, but had there already been an incident before you moved in with them where you heard about abuse between Big John and Francis, and Sean was in the home?
Uh-huh.
That was before you moved in, though? You knew about it?
Yeah. John and I, my husband, ex-husband, we were actually out at an outing by the airport where a lot of us girls and guys got together. A friend came to us and told us that we were needed at home because Francis had been beaten beyond recognition. And it was Sean that had asked somebody to get us to go help. And when we got there, Francis was behind the sofa, and we, I guess he couldn't get her to come out. And when we finally got her out from behind the furnishings, she was beat up so bad. And she didn't want to go to the hospital. She really never wanted to. I cleaned her up, she had a gash in her head that bled, and heads bleed a lot, but cleaned her up, tried to calm her down, and, invited her to our home for safety to keep him away from her, so.
Okay. Thank you. Now, as far as the children in the house at that time, what were their lifestyles like, their hobbies, their interests, peers?
There wasn't really anything. I mean, this is the kind of person you would think, for lack of better words, keep your family as a prisoner. Keep them in the home, not allow them sports or normal everyday things that, children would be able to do. They weren't allowed things like that. No sports, no type of activities.
Did they have friends come over to play?
Never.
Did they go to friends' houses to play?
Never.
Did the family do family things, like go to
Never.
movies or go to the beach, things like that?
No. Their mom wasn't even allowed to wear shorts, even at home.
Did they go to church?
No.
Were they religious?
They prayed to God. They believed in God.
Okay. So, did Sean have his own bedroom when you were living there?
He shared a room with Danny when I lived there.
Okay. And so Danny was younger, And your testimony is that Sean tended to stay in his room and crank up the heavy metal?
Yeah, he was always in a dark way,
Okay. Was he abusing drugs or alcohol?
both.
Okay. What kind of drugs was he using?
I don't know, they were being administered to him by his uncles.
Okay, we'll get to that, but,
I know that he smoked pot and he drank.
okay. Did you all get along, you and Sean, when you were living there?
Yep.
Okay.
The kids were, good when the dad wasn't around,
Did he have any other hobbies or interests, to your knowledge?
just his music.
Music, okay. Okay, we've talked about Frances's life. Did she have any other life outside of the home? Okay. What about Big John's social life? What kind of lifestyle did he have?
He was gone all the time, always gambling, always drinking, going to the pizza parlor where Eddie worked.
Okay, so did Eddie Finnegan own a pizza parlor? Or did he manage one?
It was a partnership between him and the gentleman that helped him open it and get his start in life.
Okay. Did you have suspicions that that was also maybe a little shady?
Yeah, I believe so. I wouldn't be able to prove it, but by the amount of money it took to open it and to buy a home and have a mortgage at his age,
Okay.
yeah.
What kind of gambling was, if you know, what kind of gambling was Big John doing?
Anything that he could do, from numbers to, the dog races were really big because they were all the time.
Okay.
And then when the horses came.
Did he ever get punished physically for his gambling debts?
Well, there was a time once that Eddie called and asked us if something, from the house, if any one of us had something done, but went to open the pizza parlor and found his father laying on the ground by the door, all beat up.
Okay. At some point, was there kind of a sequence of events that was the final straw of Big John living with the family?
Well, after the beatings and after, the police having to be called all the time because I had Francis get an EPO, protective order. I don't know if everybody knows the abbreviations. Every state's different, but so we had a protective order taken out on him so that he couldn't come near the home, so she could be back in her own home and the children to be safe and everything.
Did he follow that?
No. No, I was there one day.
Okay, tell the jury about what happened.
Yeah, okay. The way the house was, the driveway was very long and went up, and the garage was not an enclosed garage. It was the type you could park the car up into. And there was a door. The first door was from the garage. You walked in, laundry room, and then the second door that you walked through was the door that went into the kitchen. So even though he had the protective order against him, he said, "It's just a piece of paper, I don't care." He was screaming outside, throwing bricks at the window, banging on the door until he finally kicked the door in. He kicked the first door in, and then he kicked the second door in, and I own pit bulls, and I had Brandy, which was one of them at the time, by my side, because he just came in all drunk and screaming, had a beer bottle in his hand and threw it at Francis's head. And when he did that, I had my baby in my arms as well, and it missed my baby's head maybe by an inch or two, and my dog attacked him. My dog tore him up, and he had to go to the hospital. They quarantined my dog because, I guess that's what happens when a dog does bite somebody, regardless of whether they're protecting the home or not. And she ripped open his side and his hip and half his leg. So at the hospital, there was an officer there, but also at the home with us, there was an officer there. Communicating with each other, the officer in the hospital wanted, something from the home or whatever. And then he was like, the dog, we got to do something about the dog. The officer said he has the one that was with us, said he has a protective order. The doors are kicked in. The windows have the big, marks from the bricks because it was a huge double plated glass window. And the dog, was fine because the officer wanted to see if she was aggressive and mean like that, other than protecting the family. And Brandy wasn't. She was, a little marshmallow, but she just, she never liked him really, but.
Understood. As a result of those events, did the family minus the father, did they eventually move in with you and John Jr.?
Yeah, we couldn't let them stay there any longer.
Okay.
We had already moved out by that point, and I was visiting. So we had a landlord who had an apartment coming up available. The folks had moved out, but it still needed the painting and maintenance that they do in apartments.
Sure.
And he allowed Sean was at that point with his mother, Colleen and Danny. And so we spoke to the landlord about perhaps helping them with the money for deposits and to get in there. And because of the circumstances and because John and I had lived there so long and were good friends and stuff with them, they let them move in the day the apartment was ready and then worked out a billing arrangement for them to have so that they could, of course, have a place of their own to live where he couldn't find them.
Was Sean working? He was a teenager at that time.
He was working at Burger King.
Okay. Did Frances get a job there as well?
Yes, she did, through Sean.
And was that, I think you told me, was that Frances's first job?
Very first job. Never drove a day in her life. Very first job. She was as proud could be. I've never seen a woman so happy about going to work, and she walked every day. So, yeah, it was something for her.
Yes. I know you mentioned earlier, and I cut you off, but we do have to talk about some other serious subject matter. And I didn't mean to cut you off then, but I just wanted it to make sense, at least in my mind. So at some point, you were saying earlier that maybe while the family was living out of their car at this rest area and getting settled, okay, that Sean and his other brother were being watched by some distant relative of John Finnegan Sr.
If they were,
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Did you later speak with Frances about what was going on?
Yeah, that was horrific.
Okay. Can you speak up a little bit? Can you tell this jury what you and Frances discussed?
Well, Sean came home one day while he was supposed to be coming home from school. It wasn't school he was coming home from. And he was a hot mess. He just walked in his room, closed the door, like in desperate, like didn't want to cry, but just couldn't handle the pain any longer, and told his little brother that he was being abused by the uncles, sexually abused, and made to do things, against his will, what he didn't want to do. And I mean, it was just horrific for someone to take, a child, making them do things and laying them on their bellies and beating them and having sex with them, having other people have sex with them. just, and brutal, not, nothing like a fantasy. It was an awful, awful experience for him.
It was he and his brother,
Yes.
both of them?
Mm-hmm.
And how long did that go on?
I don't know how long it went on, because I don't know how long they had to be there with the uncle first in the beginning, but it didn't go on long after the truancy officer came to the house.
Okay. And you also learned that later in time, Sean discussed that with you some, right?
Years later,
Okay.
when we were working together.
Okay, we'll come to that, working together. But, so, the sex abuse went on for several months, and were
At least.
they also being plied with drugs and alcohol?
Yes.
Okay. And eventually a truancy officer comes around, basically, hey, these boys are not going to school.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, is that when Francis became aware of what was happening?
Yes.
Okay. And what happened as a result of Francis and Big John finding out about this truancy officer?
Okay. Truancy officer comes to the house. He was not there at the moment, but Francis took the paperwork he gave her, told her that if the boys weren't going to start showing up at school like they were supposed to, they would be kicked out of school. They would not be able to go to that school anyway. And so she had the paperwork. Her husband, John, came home. She discussed it with him briefly, and he took the paper, and he beat Sean into oblivion. He could hardly walk. He went in his room. He couldn't even go to school for a week after that. He was so bruised and battered. And, in my opinion, in such fear of his father, because he's always like this. But this was horrific, because now the school is involved, and I think, he might have been afraid that, they might find out what was going on, because he wasn't in school. He was being abused somewhere else.
Okay. Okay. At some point later, Sean's a few years older, did you two work together?
Mhm.
Okay, where did you work together?
We worked in a seafood steak restaurant, Sea Shanty,
Okay, and where was that restaurant located?
Fort Lauderdale, not far from our home.
Had Sean already been working there for a while?
Mhm.
Okay.
A couple years before I went there.
Did he help you get that job?
Mhm.
Okay. So when you started working together, what was his job title?
He was the master chef, the boss of the restaurant.
And how old was he?
At that time, bear with me for a moment. Maybe very late 20s, early 30s.
Okay. So what was he responsible for? What did he have to do?
He ran the restaurant. He was the restaurant manager, but he was also the head chef. He's a great cook. And being the type of restaurant that it was, being very nice, and, food critics coming in all the time and stuff. His boss, the owner of the restaurant, he was never with us, but Sean was the boss. So he would tell Sean, you have to make an appearance at least once in the evening. And he would have to put his white coat on and his chef's hat and go out and greet people, especially if we knew food critics were there. He would like to know anyway, just if there was something that maybe he didn't like or something, and we could make it different. But yeah, he always used to go out and greet all of the customers that he spoke to, and he loved it. He loved his job. I mean, this was a good part of his life, and being responsible and on his own, and that was a big thing to him.
Eventually, did he go to work at another restaurant? Like, did that
Years
sea
later,
shanty fail or something, and then he went
well,
somewhere else?
Sea Shanty actually tried to build other restaurants around, and I think Ohio might have been one of them, but Sean, they just crashed. They couldn't keep it going. So Minio's was a chicken place, and that was not far from Sea Shanty, same street, and just farther down the road. He went to work there as their head chef.
Okay. And eventually, did he, as a result of his job with Minio's, did he move to Tennessee at some point?
They wanted him to go up there. They wanted to open a restaurant. I think it was Knoxville.
Okay.
And
If
they
you don't know,
wanted
it's
him
okay.
to open the restaurant.
At some point, did you and Sean kind of lose touch or grow apart?
When he moved to Tennessee.
Okay. Was that also when you and John Jr. were divorced as well? Was that perhaps a cause of that? Okay.
Yes.
What about when Francis moved to Tennessee? Do you know anything about that?
I only know that John, my ex-husband, and his new wife said they had no space in their home to care for her. And Danny couldn't, Colleen could not, and John said, let Mom come live with me, I'll take care of her.
Okay. Did he come pick her up in Florida?
I think so. I think it was him.
Okay. So when you were around Sean more frequently, I mean, I know it's been 30 years. but,
34, actually. But yeah.
Did he, how did he present himself? What was his?
Well, being out of danger and being on his own for years, I guess helped him along. If you were to meet him and not know him, you would just think he was like any person, cordially mannered, kind to people, dressed well, nice vehicles, nice homes, beautiful wife, you're all around American person. You would never think that he went through the things that he went through or anything like that.
Did he have pets?
Oh yes, he loves his animals, dogs.
Okay. Was he abusing substances still, drinking or smoking or using drugs?
He would
to your
drink at
knowledge?
night and smoke pot after work, but that was at his house.
Do you think he was drinking to excess? Did he have an issue with it?
At some point, yes, he started
Okay.
getting back into being drunk a lot.
All right. Well, we appreciate you being here, Roxanne, and you know some information about this case, why we're here today.
Yes.
Is that right? And you understand that we're in a sentencing hearing in this case.
Okay.
You understand the jury's already reached a verdict that he's guilty, that Sean is guilty of murder. Do you understand that?
Okay, yes.
Do you have an opinion on what kind of penalty he should receive?
Well, I believe in God so much, and I believe that I have to live by God's law. And I would probably just ask that no matter what, I don't believe in taking a life because it's not, for me to do. So it has to at least just spare his life. I mean, punishment for all according to their bad deeds certainly, should be administered, but I mean, God, I can't, I just, to spare his life is probably what I would ask.
Pass witness, Judge.
questions? Okay, thank you, ma'am. You step down. Please stay in the courtroom. Or leave, whichever you'd like to do. Okay, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna go ahead and take our lunch break now. I'll go ahead and, if you'll go ahead and take our two alternates out first. Remember, don't discuss the case with each other. And then we'll start back here. I'd like you to eat lunch a little bit quicker than we normally do, but if you don't get back, no problem. Let's say we start back at 1:30. Okay? Ready? Everybody rise, please.
Jury, follow me.
Remember, don't discuss the case among yourselves, please. Thank you. Thank you. Have a seat, please. So, for the defense, y'all anticipated additional witnesses, or was that it?
We rest, Judge.
Okay? And so, let's think about this a little bit. Do y'all want to go ahead and go through the Moman hearing now?
We can, that's fine, we've discussed it, I discussed it this morning
Okay.
again.
Do you think he needs to sign the waiver again, or do you think just putting him on the stand's enough?
I think, can he?
Let's see what she says.
For this choice.
Yes, ma'am.
Sign the waiver and giving him the response.
I'll do that. Okay. If you'll go,
Maybe we could just,
I think I've got, if you can go in there and look on Judge Spicer's desk, and you should see a document, a folder that says jury notebook. If you'll go get that for me, please.
Judge, maybe we could just come back with the attorneys by 1:15 and do it before the jurors
Yeah.
and that way they have, because they have to close and they have to say they rest in front of jury.
Right.
anyway.
Yeah, I might go see. Let me see if I got the folder. I told him to go back there. It's sitting right here. I've got it. Do you want to go tell him, never mind?
Yeah.
Thanks. Wait just a second. Let's see, this is my only one. Yeah, this is my last one. Would you just make a copy of this? Thank you. So she's gonna make a copy of the waiver and give it to you. You want to talk about, sign it, then we'll put him up here and do that.
Can he, sorry, Judge, can he stay here like we did before?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And while we're doing that, are y'all anticipating calling rebuttal proof or? No. Okay, so then when we come back, they'll rest, then we'll go straight into closing. Y'all go first, they go, and then y'all finish, right? And then I give instructions,
Yes,
okay? Thank you, ma'am. So counsel, if y'all can review that with Mr. Finnegan, get him to sign it for me. Whenever you get it ready, let me know, and I'll put him under oath.
Thank you. colloquy at the table.
Sure, ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir, if you raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Questions, Counselor?
State your name, please.
Sean Finnegan?
Mr. Finnegan, am I your attorney in this matter?
Yes, you are.
And we are in the sentencing phase of a capital murder trial, is that right?
Yes, we are.
And we have been discussing, not only today, but in days prior, about whether or not you wish to testify at this stage of the case. Is that right?
Yes.
So I want to go over a few things with you. I have an executed waiver, and it states, and I want to go over it again orally, that you understand you have a right not to testify, and if you chose not to testify, the jury may not draw any inference from your failure to testify. Do you understand that?
I do.
Second, you understand you have the right to testify, and if you wish to exercise that right, no one can prevent you from testifying. Do you understand that?
I do.
Third, you have consulted with counsel, that's myself and Mr. Rogers, in making this decision whether or not to testify. Is that right?
Yes.
And your counsel, both attorneys, have advised you of the advantages and disadvantages of testifying. Is that right?
Yes.
And finally, after considering your rights and asking any questions you might have regarding those rights, you have chosen to, A, waive your right to testify. Is that right?
Yes.
And you've initiated that box by checking, and you've also signed and printed your name. Is that right?
Yes.
And do you have any questions or other issues or confusion about this process?
No, I don't.
Is this what you want to do?
Yes, it is.
All right, may I approach, Judge?
Sure. And so they'll, we'll mark that sentencing Exhibit 2. That will not go back with the jury.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Finnegan, you understand this is your decision, not your attorney's, correct?
Yes.
And they've explained the positives and the negatives of testifying.
Yes.
And you're agreeing freely and voluntarily that you're waiving your right to testify.
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'll do that then. Thanks, sir. So we'll stand at recess until 1:30.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.